The reason that this session came about is that, we are working in a totally different environment nowadays, and it needs to be inclusive. And I found it really difficult when needing to be able to respond to the different needs of our inclusive workspace. So I have got these three lovely people here with me, and we're going to do a little bit of maybe me asking some questions, them giving some answers, and hopefully this will sort of demystify a little bit of what is going on in our environment. Because theatre and entertainment is all about telling stories, and everyone's story is important to be told. And we need to make sure that we tell them in the right sort of way. So that's what we're going to try and do over this session. We're going to try and demystify it a little bit and make it more inclusive. And hopefully you guys can take some of these ideas back and we will make it work. I feel that's all right. It's me. All right, so on the end we've got Daedae. In the middle we've got Emlyn, there we go. And then we've got Molloy here. And rather than trying to introduce their stories, I'm going to actually ask them to introduce themselves to the group, and then we're going to do some questions and answers. So, who's going to be first?
Thanks, no.
Hi, my name is Daedae Tekoranga Waka. I'm 23 years of age, and I'm an emerging multidisciplinary artist.
Hi, my name is Emlyn Marshall. I work for InsideOUT. We're a for youth by youth queer organisation, mostly centred in Wellington. I'm also a theatre student at Victoria University and an aspiring playwright, I guess.
Kia ora, ko Molloy ho. I am the technician on this panel. Most of you guys, a large portion of you guys know me. I guess my claim to fame is that I've accidentally accumulated what appears to be the largest queer collection of technicians inside my company. We have our two token straights.
Perfect. All right, so here's my first question. How do I address you? Is it a he? Is it a she? Is it a them? Is it a they? And if I do it wrong, how insulting am I?
Me personally, I don't have a preferred pronoun. But some friends of mine who do get quite offended when they're not addressed the right pronoun can get really offended. For me, it's as simple as just asking. Instead of going, can I ask you a question, be like, can I ask what pronouns you prefer? It's that simple, I guess, well, from my standpoint anyway.
I use they, them pronouns. For me, I do prefer them. I'm not too fussed on being called other pronouns, although I'd prefer not being called she. And in terms of like how offensive it is, it varies person to person, I would say. Some people can take it really seriously to heart. I have gotten used to it over the years. It's nothing at this point. What's important is acknowledging if you do mess up someone's pronouns that you've asked them about and they've told you, just to acknowledge it and then move on. Don't make a big deal out of it. Nothing is more embarrassing and annoying than someone messing up your pronouns and then going, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, it's just so hard for me to remember. It's like this. Don't make it a big thing. It's not a big thing unless you make it one.
Yeah, like one of the best pieces of advice I got sort of when I first moved into the queer community was treat it like you've called somebody's dog the wrong thing. Like if you've been fussing over this puppy, you're like, what a good girl, and the dude, the owner goes, nah mate, it's a boy. You don't go, oh fuck, I'm so sorry. You go, he's a very good boy. And then keep petting him, And in terms of my pronouns, I'm mostly they, them, and sort of flexible either side depending on how many fucks I give and how much I like you. For context, Catherine was my boss for a while and kind of had to deal with the fallout of the very stoic office going, no, that's a she. You can't have they, them, that's more than one person. And our little corner was just like, yeah, whatever.
yeah, whatever. So one of the things I read on a lot of the stage management websites is that the term, ladies and gentlemen, this is your half-hour call, is really inappropriate. What do you guys feel?
I guess, well, because I've been in a production where what they've done is, kia ora koutou, this is your 5-minute call, rather than going, kia ora ladies and gentlemen. You know, that's how simple it was for me.
Some people prefer to add like an other onto the end, so if you go ladies, gentlemen, others, that can be a little, I don't know, some people might find that a little weird. Myself, if it's a more informal setting, I would go guys, gals, and non-binary pals, but if it's a slightly more formal setting, that might not be appropriate, in which case just not using ladies and gentlemen, just, yeah.
I'm personally a big fan of cast and crew, company members, or occasionally, if it's a more informal situation, I will tailor my introduction to what we are. So, end of last year I did Shrek, and my tannoy calls were ogres and other fairy tale creatures.
Good way of doing it.
I thought so.
Yeah. Okay. We are... Theatre can be quite rigid, even though we create different things, but there is a hierarchy in theatre and a procedure in theatre, you know, rehearsals, performances, you know, technical in somewhere over there. So how is it when, in a way, you are unique and different? And how does that then, how do we and how do you guys come together to create a workspace? So trying to make that a wee bit clearer in my head. What should we do at the first day of rehearsal? How should we make an easy way of introductions? Yeah.
To us first.
Do you want the stage manager to go, right, tell us who you are and what you are, or?
Just like sit down and have a conversation. Like it'll vary person to person. Just finding out what would be the best way to tailor it to that person's specific needs and wants out of the production, and just being there to back them up, whatever they say or do. Like if someone says in the first introductions that they use they them pronouns, it's your job to be backup for them, to use they them pronouns for them as well, to show to the rest of the cast and crew that, you know, you're there for them, and that is really comforting for that person in question.
And it sounds really obvious, but make sure that there's bathrooms we can use without getting punched in the face.
Well, that was going to be my next question. What do we do about bathrooms, guys? Because we've got male and female bathrooms and we've got handicapped bathrooms. If I was building a theatre today, what should I do with bathrooms?
Make all bathrooms unisex.
Yeah.
Just make all of the bathrooms separate stall bathrooms and don't put any gendered signs on the door. That way everyone can use them, it doesn't matter, you don't have to go out of your way to find, because that's often the thing, if a company or a building adds in a gender neutral bathroom later on, it'll often be in somewhere really inaccessible, like far away from the rest of the bathrooms. It'll might require you going up to someone and being like, I have to use the bathroom, can you give me the key to this bathroom? Which can be really annoying if you're already trying to do your work and you have to take time out to do this. So just making all of the bathrooms gender neutral bathrooms can be very helpful.
Or relabeling them according to needs of the show?
Maybe.
Or is that more offensive?
I feel like by putting more labels on, you're almost giving the community more labels to put onto themselves, and it's like we don't need more labels than we've already got, kind of thing.
That said, there are some situations where, especially if you're doing school shows, where parents will freak out at the idea of their children sharing stalls with people who aren't necessarily their same gender identity or anything like that. In that situation, it's not a bad idea to have males, females, other, or separated into under 18s, gendered, over 18s, non, with exceptions to that as needed. Certainly with larger shows.
Dressing rooms, you mean?
Dressing
Or
rooms,
bathrooms.
Dressing rooms and bathrooms.
Dressing rooms and
All
bathrooms.
of the above, as you need to. You know, any spaces that have traditionally strong gender delineations we need to allow for people who don't fit within those.
And in a way that isn't the biggest deal in the world. Like, it should be normal and natural and just as easy going to a gender-neutral space as it is going to a gendered space. It's equality.
Straight loco, I guess. So we've got an existing space and it only has ladies and gents. How do we deal with that if we want to create a non-gender specific, and perhaps the architecture of the two facilities sort of lend to the fact that there are urinals in one and stalls only in the other. Is there an easy solution to that?
I mean, the magical ideal is a retrofit, so everything's all individual cubicles, but also being arts and council-owned spaces and all that kind of stuff. I know that it doesn't necessarily lend itself to being able to be retrofitted like that. If you've got another space that you can put gender-neutral facilities in, that's not a bad idea. One of the other things that I've seen is legitimately just both spaces being made unisex, with a note on the front of one of them saying this is all pans and the other one saying this one has urinals.
I worked on headwork at Corfeta recently and they relabelled the toilets there mostly sitting and mostly standing.
Yeah.
And people made their own decisions from there and it seemed to work.
I mean, we have bits where you have just a little bat-shaped sign that has, I believe it's from the Human Rights Act, that says you have the right to use any bathroom for which you identify. Just next to, I mean, I don't say ladies, gents, they have like cute little pictures of like a bowl hat or something, so it doesn't exactly say gents, but we just put them next to that, so it doesn't say like there's a urinal in here, but it just says if you want to go in here, you can totally go in here.
Anyone else got any interesting solutions?
And of course, the follow-up to that is if somebody comes up to you as a front of house, if you're running the venue and says, oh, I just saw this dude go into the ladies' bathroom, don't be afraid to tell them to keep their faces to themselves.
All right, so we've touched on dressing rooms and we've touched on bathrooms. Daedae, wardrobe fittings and costumes. Ooh, sorry guys. Is there anything that's, anything that was done well for you versus anything that was really horrid?
I guess so far my experiences have been great. I haven't had any problems with that. I've had costume designers come in, and because I've been playing a transgender character, or what I like to call whakaleiti, which is the Tongan umbrella term for LGBT, they would ask me, okay, so what bra size are you? And then I would be like, oh crap, I'm a 16 double D. And then, it's... Personally, I just haven't had a problem because I've always been open with who I am and not afraid to be like, I need this, and I also need a size 13 heel. Can you find that? And I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's hard to find a size 13 heel because, you have to go overseas to find that. But, it's hard because I haven't had any problems with that. Everyone's been so open, they're loving, they're just like, cool, we can get that for you. I haven't been demanding. But it's hard. I haven't had any problems.
That's good.
I've felt included.
Very good. Yeah.
And besides me making myself included, whether they like it or not. Part of my nature.
Mm-hmm. Either of you two want to?
I'm trying to think, like, I've been the costume designer for a couple university shows, and so that was a lot of fun being able to like play around with gender and make it. But I'm always a proponent or supporter of talking to the people, just open communication, ask what they would prefer beforehand, maybe in an email or whatever if you're going in for a costume fitting and you haven't had a chance to talk in person beforehand, just asking them what they would like, what accommodations they need. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, all sensible stuff. I'm going to pause on my questions. Has anyone suddenly gone, oh, I want to ask something? Here we go.
Yeah.
So not coming from a theatre venue, but from a receiving venue that receives multiple events, different natures, different different aspects of performance or entertainment in whatever way. Are we then likely to expect updated production riders, where the production will then state the preferences of how existing facilities are used in the venue? And I'm talking about, sport dressing rooms with showers. It's kind of hard for a venue that needs to schedule services to keep those rooms tidy as well, and having staff, international staff or multicultural staff for whom it might be unacceptable to enter a dressing room of the opposite gender. How would we deal with that?
What would you like to see done?
Well, if it's
do you want it in the riders?
Well, it's probably just with any change that's thought of or supposed to be implemented, thinking, changing the perception and thinking of the operators as well. That would probably be helpful, indicating that in the production requirement, if that's the expected culture within the production company that's touring, because that's obviously quite a new thing for venues to consider. There's this whole, like you said, school productions to come, all of a sudden, and the parents might have an issue, and then we'll just look at everybody having an issue, trying to be all inclusive, and how far do we go? And some guidelines, so some help from the production side would be great, if that is such an important part for the touring company. Well, that's just my thought that just came up.
Yeah.
Trying to work out how I would explain to our venue managers, oh yeah, but so for this show, it's going to be completely different. Especially when it comes to showers. It's like if it's a venue that, receives the tour and then at the end of the night they leave, then how do you expect that to be managed? Or at some point, coming from a venue that's operated by a council, for instance, there's a whole lot of guidelines to be followed as far as what we as staff need to produce and how we are supposed to behave and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Might help if that's the new way we want to go. Then there might be some support required as far as this is what we would like to do. This is how we want to run this gig.
I can't speak for other touring production managers, but for as long as I've been writing riders, I've had information in there about dressing room requirements, accessibility requirements, showering requirements, and everything like that, to forewarn venues. Whether I'm writing it for a tour that I'm travelling with myself, or whether I'm writing it for a tour where everybody does fit into that traditional binary, it's been habit. And when I was running venues, certainly half to 2/3 of the riders that I was getting through also had that same information. So I think it's certainly becoming more and more standard. It might be a little bit harder in a larger scale council venue. I personally can't speak to that. My largest venue's only 2,000 cap, so it's not huge.
Molloy, I assume as you write those riders, you're aware that the person the outfit you're writing to is probably more likely to have a binary setup for showering and that, so you have that in mind as you create that document.
Yeah, that said, it was in the template that I was provided when I was first starting out as a baby production manager. Received, and this is 12 years ago, kind of a thing, like little itty bitty Molloy. And this is back before the internet was all over non-binary and other genders as a thing that was actually accessible. Like, I don't know about you guys, I think you're a bit younger than me, but I remember flailing in the dark as a kid.
I mean, I realised when I was about 14, I'm 20 now, so, maybe gives you an idea.
I guess you just deal with that
venues in New Zealand will basically go tell you to fuck yourself, and this is what we have, and you have to deal with it. And as a production manager, you go on there, whether if you want a unisex toilet and stuff like that, you go around and you put up a sign yourself. It's about the production in the company, moving into the venue and making the venue yourself and part of the company and what you want. That's what you do.
And I would say even if it is preferable to have all of the facilities be gender neutral, it is, like, I would prefer one unisex toilet that's far away and hard to reach than no unisex toilets. Like, it's important to have facilities, even if they're not ideal, it's still better to have something than nothing. So.
And one of the things we do sometimes get back is, yeah, no, we're not doing that for you, but you can do whatever you want once your hire starts.
Do you think that's an acceptable response?
I think it's a very Kiwi response.
Probably pragmatic.
Yeah, especially the yeah, nah. As somebody who's running a touring house or receiving venue, you might not have time to necessarily do all the setup and everything else. Quite often stage managers who are coming through or production managers who are coming through will have, if it's a thing that they're aware of and have requested, they'll bring their own signs with them anyway or ask for a space to print it and have time allocated to go through and do the allocations. Like, it's not that much harder than doing your initial dressing room allocations when you come into a large venue, you know?
Anyone else got any other questions? This pause one. Did that answer? Did that give you some ideas?
Yeah, well, it's
enough?
just,
Yeah.
no, it's just,
Good. Yeah.
just a thought.
Yeah. What's sitting in my back of my head is that maybe there could be some words written, you know, some helpful 101 words for for houses to understand what the group is coming in and how we adapt our spaces. So yeah.
And it's also something I think with, you know, an ongoing touring house, I would be under the expectation that if they've had non-binary or trans performers in the past, that they would have an idea of how that was allocated by that company. So to go, great, the last time someone who had a large non-binary contingent came in, this is how they allocated their bathrooms. Seems like acceptable information to hang on to.
So what can we do to encourage? What can I do as me, a very non-educated straight person? What can I do to encourage a safe working environment for everyone?
Educate yourself and then make the resources you find available to everyone else you're working with. Quick shameless plug, InsideOUT has we have a bunch of really good, really easy to understand resources on our website. We have a series of videos, which are like 4 minutes each, about all of different genders and sexualities that is really easy and really simple to just like chuck in a group chat or put up as a link to somewhere. So making yourself knowledgeable about this, and then making sure that communicate that to your cast and crew. Say, just a simple, if anyone has any questions about accessibility requirements, please come talk to me. Making it clear that you're a safe, inclusive space will make others feel comfortable enough to come talk to you and hopefully tell you what accommodations that they need.
So InsideOUT is all one word?
InsideOUT, last out capitalised, I believe. But yeah, just InsideOUT.org.nz. Yeah. Good.
It's actually excellent that you just mentioned that, because it's just triggered in my brain that if any of you are interested in doing the level 4 qual, part of it is a section on inclusivity in workplace about, and it could be, there's a resource to, there is a resource that's available that you can hook into. All right, so
You're searching for questions? I don't know, have any of you toured internationally at all? Just wondering about, New Zealand is a relatively progressive place. Not all countries have the same laws. And one thing I've noticed as a gay person travelling internationally is that we can be sent on tour to a place where it's actually illegal for me to be me. And what sort of things to put in place around that. It's another risk on your risk assessment to protect the safety of the company in an environment where you've got to go even further underground. I don't know if you've had any experience of that or know anyone that has that you can talk about.
I personally have yet to travel internationally, so I wouldn't be able to help you with that question.
I've travelled internationally, not for work, but for holidays and stuff. And on a trip the other year, last year, I visited Barcelona and went to Barcelona Pride and then went to Russia with Pride merch in my suitcase, which was not ideal. So it's something that queer people are very aware of, I think, hopefully, the risks of travelling internationally. And I know it was not comfortable for me to be in that situation. But I was kind of able to put it aside because we were only there for 2 days. So I would guess it would make sure that the people involved are comfortable, like what level of backup they might need if something does happen. If they're comfortable with you calling them more gendered pronouns during your stay, how long, depending on how long you're going to be there, if you need to keep checking in with them and making sure they're okay. Just trying to see what they would think about this, and also making sure to bear in mind what you can do as an ally to support them. Yeah.
I got around it by sending a straight white guy as my substitute. And that was definitely for the better for the space that we were touring to. With other tours where I've been sending my team off internationally, it's been giving the people who we're sending off on tour the option to swap out if they don't feel safe. And if they do feel like they really want to go, it's creating that safe space for them, creating basically backup plans and discussions around how to get around sort of protocol and cultural issues, and how the other people within the production can support them with that to make sure that they're safe and they're held, which I know just sounds really wanky and fluffy, but I promise you it's a good thing.
So I'm going to throw it back to the oracle of health and safety. What sort of risks would have your risk assessment included?
Well, I get a bit flamboyant with my risk assessment. So I get a bit creative and I try and be humorous. So I believe from memory, we were touring to India. 2 of the 3 of us fell into the category of gay. So I said that we would be instructed not to be too flamboyant and to leave our feather boas and us chaps behind. But also that we wouldn't leave our risk assessment lying around to be viewed by anyone. So I got a wee bit silly. But the reality was we were touring, and a young musician at the time was only 21. He'd never left New Zealand, and he didn't even know. He'd never stepped out of New Zealand. So he didn't know that it was illegal. So we had to do a whole education thing of saying, dude, you might want to stay off Tinder while you're in India because you could get arrested and it won't be nice. And that sort of education thing as well. It wasn't just around educating the company. We happened to have a tour manager over there who was pretty liberal. But it was actually making sure that the people involved knew what they were stepping into and the safety for them around that.
I do know a couple of the ballet tours that we took overseas that there was a conversation held about appropriateness of your behaviour in your location, and it felt really odd to be having to tell someone to be someone different while they were in this location, but it was delivered from a place of the heart, in that we needed all of those dancers and we wanted to make sure that they were safe. It included things like about, not so much Tinder, but appropriate websites and inappropriate websites, and also just being as a group and making sure that they travelled together when they were visiting the gay clubs. They went as a sort of a group to make sure that they had their own backup. But it seems really odd to be giving more labels and more protection. But do you guys feel uncomfortable when we do all of this extra work to try and keep you guys safe? Does it make you feel weird?
Appreciate it. It is, but it can get much at times.
Yeah.
Because you're like, fuck's sakes, are we back to square one again? It feels like that. But because I know where you're coming from, it makes it easier to be like, and I've just learnt to I guess it's just something I've just learnt to cope with,
It's very much a necessary evil, and I'm prepared for it if it happens, and it's something I'm resigned to, but it's not something I'm ever going to be comfortable with, I don't think. And so it's important to be aware of that and to be aware of the person's feelings and, continue communicating that, this is to help them and this is for their own safety, and you wouldn't be doing this unless it was absolutely necessary.
And as somebody who's been on both sides of those briefings, I tend to take them about as seriously as Kathy does. So very seriously, but with lots of humour. I mean, Smiley's, I think 4 or 5 of you in this room have been on the other side of my health and safety briefings and all that kind of stuff. It's about jokes and it's about love.
I think you would brief people on what's culturally acceptable, and in some cultures being overtly sort of public displays of affection from anyone isn't appropriate. So it's making sure that everyone is being culturally safe, and that if you're touring to another culture, it's just manners really about that. So it's part of that. But also you don't want to get arrested.
No, not really, especially not overseas.
I feel like it might also be worth mentioning that it's very easy to out someone in these kind of conversations. Like if you are aware that someone in your company does identify as queer in some way, to not shout it amongst the entire company in case that person doesn't want other people to know. And same with if you're touring into venues, that person might not necessarily want everyone that they're working with every day to be aware of these things because that's their choice. And so sometimes I think it is actually about talking to them directly and saying, let's have a conversation. And if you were touring internationally, perhaps saying, we're not aware of anyone who might have these kind of needs due to their identity. Please come and chat with us if you feel safe to do so, because there's safety for that person in their own control over the matter. Once you remove it, we're going to feel much more torn apart.
Well, you would be remiss sending somebody young into a situation where they don't actually even know. That's a risk. It's the same. It was always the same briefing that I said, and don't touch the electrical bare wires that they're putting together instead of having a plug. It's on that level, same level. So.
And as somebody who got outed at a venue that I deliberately stayed shouted at, who then had to leave that job because our work vehicle got tagged and my letterbox got set on fire and all sorts of fun shit. Do be careful about not outing people. The people who aren't safe will come from the strangest of places, and quite often they're the people that everybody will say is the loveliest front of house manager ever in space. Do be careful about looking after your queer kids.
Because I was going to say bullying. Does it happen?
Yes.
Yeah?
Fuck yes.
Is it direct or indirect?
I guess it depends on the crowd. For me, it's mostly been indirect because Wellington's a pretty liberal place and Vic's theatre department is a pretty liberal place, so I haven't encountered much directness. It's just been a lot of confusion and a lot of very awkward questions and maybe not taking the hint on a lot of things. And also, it can be difficult to know when it is appropriate to come out in these situations. Like, it's always a struggle if I'm going into a lesson or a tutorial for the first time and being like, okay, at what point do I start telling people about my pronouns? And I imagine it's very much the same for work environments in terms of like, okay, at what point is it an appropriate place to do it? What is the level of appropriateness that I can have about telling people about my pronouns and about enforcing that? So that can be difficult.
Going to throw it back out that way. Now's the chance to ask the questions.
Inclusivity 101, what are some of your personal pet peeves that maybe some of us in the room aren't aware we're doing? In terms
Can I ask you a question? Are you... Darling.
Have you had an operation yet?
Yeah.
More common than you think.
If I mention that I've changed my name, don't ask me what my name was before. It brings up bad memories, and it's a lot of the time it's simple curiosity, but I changed my name for a reason, and I don't want to be reminded of what my name was before. And if I do tell you, don't tell other people.
Yes. Don't threaten to call my mum. Don't actually call my mum.
Don't sort people being like, ladies on one side, males on the other side, if you're looking for like a good way to split a group evenly. Then it's a very awkward situation for everyone involved.
I've got one, guys, which is look at your paperwork and your forms. We have lovely Molloy. The number of times when I first met Molloy about 4 years ago, it was like, so is Molloy the first name or the surname, and which one do you want to put it in? Because it has to fit in this form. You've got to have a first name and a second name.
My first ETNZ conference, my labels had Molloy, 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 the Molloy.
I like that one.
Yeah, the Molloy has turned into one of our email addresses.
Yeah.
And I believe there was one where it was Molloy, comma, with Sam Mintz.
Well, that's how you booked it that time, but that's all right.
Yes, I did put him in charge.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. Like, if you're in charge of forms and things like that, do be aware that lots of us won't use two names, or we'll use an initial and a name, and Mr., Mrs., Doctor. I wish I was a doctor, but I'm not a doctor. Don't be afraid to make things optional. I know that for council things, it does mess with gathering data, but I can't speak to other councils, but certainly Auckland Council has a space for you to go back as a venue and go, hey, I have all of these people that don't fit your shitty boxes, and they'll come out and they'll have a very panicked meeting with you with very nice scones. And talk over how to actually make their data collection fit the data that you're collecting, because it looks good for them if they're actually inclusive of all of the humans instead of just their little tick boxes.
Any other pet peeves? I love them. Any other questions from anyone?
One of the things that I struggle with in my efforts to be a good ally and friend is identifying, is with friends who have recently come out or are in the process of transitioning, or who I've only just been made aware of as not fitting inside of the binary. I struggle when I'm in public or in a situation where I see someone that they've known for perhaps before those times misgender them, and then I sort of find myself going, okay, are we out and proud? Are we sheltered? Are we closeted? Where do we sit within that? And I think more than anything, it's a very personal conversation in a case-by-case basis. But is there a binary option for dealing with it? Is there a go-to thing?
I would say it kind of depends on the person who's coming up to you. If it's like an old lady who's wearing like a cross necklace or something, like someone who very obviously might have a problem with it, I would err on the side of caution and then afterwards deeply apologise to the person and ask if that was the appropriate way to go. If it's a younger person, like I would say look for their cues, like try and see how comfortable they are with the situation. If it's someone they seem to value a lot and aren't correcting them themselves, then maybe take that into consideration. It can be very tricky, and I find myself sometimes being like, oh, do I actually want to correct this person? Oh dear, is this a safe situation for me to make myself known?
Because you talk about being misgendered as just accepting that as the thing that happens, and that realistically you probably shouldn't get that offended by it because it's a new thing and everyone's trying, but then also that feels like backwards or not progressive or something. Yeah,
I mean, yeah, for me, like, being misgendered is a thing that happens, and I've gotten used to it, and if I correct you on it, it means that I want to see you again. Like, I think some people get a little bit, like, they don't mean to be, but they get a little bit offended when I correct them on my pronouns. They get like, oh, they get kind of sad and hurt about it. If I'm correcting you, it's because I'm putting in the effort because I want to see you again, and I don't want to have to deal with this happening. If I just let it slide, that's a bad sign. Yeah, but for helping other people, definitely like look to their cues and err on the side of caution. But then apologise and ask if that was the appropriate course, I would say, personally.
You want to speak to it?
Hi, total.
As somebody who is definitely one of the people who has put you in that position, sorry, not sorry. Spencer's been our baby for like 7 years now. Case by case. Look at the friend groups and the other people within the group who may or may not be using correct pronouns. So if there's one person who you know is inside this circle who's obstinately sticking to something else, correct them. Don't be afraid to correct them. If it's somebody who's loosely associated but isn't part of the group that you'd usually hang out with and is with a bunch of other people that probably have no fucking idea, then ignore it for now, but check in with your person. Like, it's a lot of hard work, especially as close friends when your compadre isn't out and proud and wearing handy-dandy pronoun badges or anything like that.
Right. Go for it, Catherine. Sorry.
Kind of office environment where it was just about to go into fringe, and to the heads of department, the person who done the hiring said, just as a heads up, we have a non-binary person on our team, and I want to know whether you would, well, I guess this is hard because you don't represent everyone. Is it okay to sort of have that conversation without the person in the room? Should it be coming entirely from the person who is choosing those pronouns and identifies as that gender? That it just felt icky at the time, and I'm still struggling with how to place it, if that makes sense.
Do you think a conversation had been held with the NB person in question before that announcement? Because that kind of changes it.
My instinct was that they had sort of flagged it in the interview or interviewing process or in the contracting process, but perhaps hadn't said, can you please make sure the rest of your team are aware? And I think that's why I felt icky.
Yeah, that's a bit of an iffy situation. It should be on that person's own terms. I'm very happy with people close to me correcting other people about my pronouns. I'm very happy with that, but a lot of non-binary people aren't and would prefer to be a little less open about it. So yeah, that doesn't sound like a great situation.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left. If there is anyone else with a question, I was going to maybe wrap this. Oh, there's one there.
Your thoughts on like body autonomy, like say you're a performer and you had to do a costume change backstage where you were basically naked, or if you were being flown and a rigger had to get you into a harness and, you know, be very intimate with you, or even I know someone working in film and they said that they only get the women on the sound team to put the radio mics on the actors because they're getting all up in the costume. Thoughts on stuff like that?
I mean, personally, I'm happy with my body. I'm all about body positivity, so I don't care if you're male, female, in between. Whatever you identify as, I don't care. Because I'm there to do the job, and my job is to tell my story, our story. And so I'm like, all you're doing is putting a mic on me. I'm not going to act, ooh, you know? Because that's just putting unnecessary, well, for me. It's like, that's unnecessary in that moment for me. I just need to and go on stage. But for some, you know, like you said, some people, but me personally,
Yeah, I'm personally fine with it. I'm very comfortable with, like, if it's happening for a performance, I'll do it. I don't care. But I would be aware that some people might not be as comfortable with that, and to be prepared to have a talk with them about accommodations and ways to work around that. But yeah, hopefully the person will be as comfortable with their body as we are, but it might not happen.
I fucking hate people touching me, that's why I'm a technician. When I'm in charge of a room or a space, I will give people the option, especially like mic ups and quick changes, especially dancer quick changes where they're down to pasties and gods that they've prayed to. You give them the option, you know, not every space will have, not every show that you're on will have a technician, a sound guy, or sound human, or a fucking costumer, or stage manager that will line up with your gender and your preferences. So there has to be accommodations on both sides. But if you have the conversation, most of the time people will be well stoked.
Yeah. I think what I'm taking from this is to have that private conversation. Yeah? Have that private conversation. Look at the bathroom situations in all of our venues and how maybe moving forward when we get the chance to rebuild, remodel, we look at that accommodation, look at dressing room spaces, how we get them split up. I'm going to remember some of the pet peeves. I think, yeah, give me a list. They're good. It's good. So I would like to thank you, all three of you. It's been really great that you've sat down here, put yourself on a stage in front of these people, especially Molloy, who wears black so that she can work backstage and remain invisible. We have got another session in about 20 minutes, and then there will be afternoon tea. Molloy has said that if you've got any questions that you'd prefer to maybe address her directly with, she's given me an email number. You're coming to dinner tonight, aren't you? Yes? Yes, you're coming to dinner, so there's always access that way. Inside Out?
I'm perfectly happy fielding any questions on a more one-to-one basis. Come up anytime.
And Daedae, you're performing at the moment, aren't you?
I am. So
Go on, do a plug.
Everyone come down to Bats Theatre from the 9th to the 13th of July to watch Maniac on the Dance Floor, where yours truly will be dancing the floor.
So thank you. I know first session after lunch is always a bit hard to come back and be energetic. I really appreciate you coming and sitting and listening to this fantastic three. And we'll see you in the next session. Thank you, Late.